So budgeting in general, we all know is very useful, maybe boring, but useful. Give us some really good guidelines.
So sometimes when you go to Professor Google, right, and you're seeing how to budget or getting tips for budgeting or those types of things, you may come across suggested budget guidelines. And those are, they vary from source to source, but a lot of times, those have come about by financial experts looking at the way many Americans spend or the proportions where we Americans spend our money.
Okay.
So for example, we might say that housing should be about 35% of your budget. Savings, 10%, kind of a minimum on those types of things as a suggestion. Transportation, about 15%. Other debt, credit cards, those types of things, about 15%. And then your other expenditures, the stuff that you live on, the stuff that you enjoy, another 25%. I think those can be helpful. It can do a couple of things. First of all, if you go through and you see where your money is going and you compare it to a budget guideline, you can see how closely you're following that. And I think it can do a couple of things for us. First of all, you can say, wow, my housing expense is 40%. So that's 5% above what some financial experts would recommend. However, my other expenses are a little lower. Maybe my other expenses, my miscellaneous expenditures are only coming in at 15%. So at that point, you can kind of determine, am I a house person? Is the extra money of the house worth it to me? And if it is, then that's fine. So I'm not one that would suggest necessarily that you're strict. It can help us determine whether we're spending our money on the things that we value. So for example, we might be, if you're a car person, for example, you might want your transportation budget to be more than 15% and you're fine with that.
Yeah.
Maybe you would rather have 20 or 25% in transportation because the car is so important to you and the housing not so much, right? So maybe you'd be happy to spend 30 or 28% on housing and have more for a car. But those categories can be a great way to start. It can also help us reflect and look back on whether, as I said, not only is our money going to the things that we value, but do we have one category that's completely off the charts? And so it just gives you a little cause for reflection on that. How can that be meaningful to you?
Okay, so if we look at our budget and my housing is at 50%, I'm way outside of my budget of where I should be, because I look at this chart that we have, and we've got debt, transportation, living, housing, savings. Where's my fun money, Tony?
Well, fun money actually is very, very important. And we've learned over the years, especially in couples and relationships, one of the best things that can happen is to have, money for each of you. His money and her money, for example. And it might be a small amount, but it's the type of thing where there's no guilt or expectation associated with the money. So for example, if you want to go and have a pedicure and it's within your fun money to do that, you can go and do that. And so you don't have to worry about that. Maybe I want to, go to the movie with a buddy or something. And if it's in my fun money allowance, I can do that, those types of things. We often find too that in relationships as people, work together and try to blend budgets, as you mentioned earlier, we don't always agree on the same things. I remember when I first got married, my wife and I literally had $20 of disposable income for the month. And my wife wanted to go to Taco Bell 4 times, and eat off the dollar menu. And I wanted to buy a CD. And she was like, food. And I'm like, but music in the car, right? And so,
I love it.
It's not common necessarily for couples or people in relationships to agree where the money goes. So having those little allowances for the your money and the my money actually can be a great way to kind of alleviate that. There's no stress, there's no expectation. You get to spend that, and it's agreed upon in advance. You spend that money how you want. I can spend it on the other person. I can totally spend it on myself. All of that's good. So actually, when it comes to finances and relationships, the your money, my money thing, even if it's just a little bit, can be a very healthy thing.